Grief does not get easier after a year. In fact, year 2 can be even harder. You are still carrying the weight of everything that you lost, and now you're doing it in a world that assumes, because the first year has passed, you're fine. For many people, year 2 is when grief gets even more painful, and it's time we talk about why. Hey there, grief growers. I am so honored to be back here with you today, as always. If you've been growing alongside me in my work for a while, welcome back. And if you are new to me and my work, hello. My name is Shelby Forsythia. I am a grief coach, very soon to be 3-time author, and the founder of Life After Loss Academy, which is an online course and community that has helped dozens of grieving people stop feeling lost, stuck, broken, and alone, and start building lives that they genuinely love from the lives that loss forced them to live. This includes not only death-related losses, but also divorce and breakup, major diagnosis, estrangement, and every other major life transition that changes you. Here on Grief Grower, we believe that grief is not something we get over. It is something that we grow with and alongside, and that when we stop treating grief like a problem to be solved and start treating it like an invitation to live more deeply, we can all create meaningful lives that are rich with the memories that we carry, the struggles that we faced, and the preciousness of what it is to be alive right here and right now. Before we get into today's topic, just a quick reminder that release day for my new book, Of Course I'm Here Right Now, this is my 3rd book, is coming up on March 31st. This little guidebook teaches you how to support a grieving person in your life with the best free support tool that any of us has at our disposal at any time, and that is words. It teaches you what to say so that you never enter another conversation with someone who's grieving, wondering, what on earth do I say to comfort them? I've said this before and I'm going to say it again, but pre-orders are so incredibly helpful to me as an author in terms of getting the book seen by bookstores and the powers that be in terms of marketing land. So you can find a link to pre-order. Of course, I'm here right now in the show notes. If you have already done the work of pre-ordering the book, thank you so much. You can submit your receipt number from Barnes & Noble or Amazon or your local indie bookstore on my website to access the free 6-week book club that begins in mid-April, where we will read Of Course I'm Here Right Now as a group and discuss it together. This kicks off again in mid-April, so make sure you have the book in your hands or digitally before then. And lastly, if you would like to celebrate the launch of this book with me, I am hosting 2 launch parties that I would love to see you at. The first one is taking place here in Chicago on March 30th, the eve before the book comes out, so you will get this book in your hands before the rest of the world. The second launch party is the day the book comes out, which is March 31st here on YouTube. So no matter where in the world that you live, you can tune in to hear more about the clients and interactions that inspired this book. You can also learn what to say to comfort someone grieving, plus hear me read some excerpts live. And yes, I will be taking your questions. And of course, the replay of that event will be made available if you cannot attend the virtual event live. Now we are so ready to get to today's topic. And this is, watch me climb up on my soapbox, grief does not get easier after a year. In fact, year 2 can be even harder. This is my locus. This is the fount from which everything else will pour today. Picture this. You are in year 2 of grieving a loss, and you have probably discovered that it is not easier like everybody promised. In fact, it is probably harder for you than year 1. People around you, message boards online, even books and sympathy cards may have said things to you like, the first year is the worst, just get through the firsts, as if grief comes with a built-in expiration date. But now the calendar of your loss has flipped to year 2, the support has stopped coming, and everyone around you seems to expect you to suddenly be okay. But I know, and every other griever who's ever walked the face of the earth knows, that you're not okay. Not really. You are still carrying the weight of everything that you lost, and now you're doing it in a world that assumes, because the first year has passed, you're fine. If this is you right now, grief grower listening to this episode, I need you to know that you are not broken, you are not doing grief wrong, and you are definitely not failing at grief because navigating loss after the first year still feels hard. Despite what society tries to tell us, grief does not magically get easier after a year. In fact, for many people, year 2 is when grief gets even more painful, and it's time we talk about why. So in today's episode, I want to share a few different reasons why the second year of grief is often harder than the first, and I hope you will share it with someone in your life who is navigating their second year of grief, or you'll share it with someone who said, oh, just give it a year, and you'll be fine after that. Here's the first reason. The world moves on, but you're still living with grief. One of the most jarring things that happens in hitting the 1 year mark is how suddenly it seems like everyone around you expects you to be fine. In the early days of loss, especially if you had a death-related loss, you probably received some form of grief support. For instance, people bringing meals, doing a meal train, coworkers giving you grace on big or important projects, or family checking in on you on a regular basis. But around the 6 to 12 month mark, and even sooner for other types of loss, I'm thinking like breakup, miscarriage, things that society doesn't take as seriously, things like pet loss, things like estrangement, things like a major diagnosis that changes your life but not really the lives of other people around you, support fades away. People assume that you're back to normal, heavy air quotes here, back to normal, or they simply don't know what to say or do to support you anymore. And many of them, whether they say this out loud or whether they keep it to themselves, they want the old you to return. They think that because that year mark has passed, you should be over it by now. Again, heavy air quotes around the word over it. But you are not the same person that you were before your loss, and you are certainly not over it. Whether you are grieving a death, divorce, breakup, major diagnosis, any other life-altering transition, grief has changed you. Loss has changed you. And often, the second year is when you feel the weight of that truth most clearly. You might begin to recognize, wait. They're moving on, and I'm still grieving. And that kind of realization, that is a grief all its own. The second reason that year 2 can often be harder than year 1 is that the shock wears off and reality sinks in. In year 1 of Life After Loss, so many of my grieving clients and students inside Life After Loss Academy describe being in a kind of fog or a haze. One of my clients, I say this often, she referred to it as being in frozen mode. For you, this might look like moving through the motions without being fully present, or prioritizing getting through each hour or each day as it comes, or doing the bare minimum of what you need to do to survive, but it all feels sort of surreal and fuzzy and not quite like your life. In my first book, which is called Permission to Grieve, it has a little band across it because this was my printer copy that I got before the book actually came out. But I described the first year after my mom died like this. It felt like I was living my life behind a thick pane of glass. I was disengaged at all times, one step removed from everything happening around me. I returned to campus, participated in classes, and graduated with honors. But especially in those first months following my mom's death, it was like I was living someone else's life. Or like I was living in a movie directed by the world's cruelest movie director. I was an actress showing up to play a part, not the person who wrote the play. Where I had once identified so much with a world of learning all I could learn, diligently working towards dreams and goals, and actively showing up for club meetings, parties, and social events, I now felt distant from all of it. The suffocating wool blanket of "my mom is dead" covered everything I used to call my life, so I disconnected from it. It didn't belong to me anymore. I kept showing up, robotically moving through the motions. On the outside, I looked like I was doing okay, but on the inside, nothing I was surrounded by felt like mine. I was checking tasks off the list, but I wasn't the person who made the list. I didn't even care about whether or not the list got completed anymore. I had switched from manual to automatic. Life continued, but I was no longer driving. I was just along for the ride. And this is from page 34 and 35 of my first book, Permission to Grieve. That was my experience of the first year after my mother's death. And regardless, I have to say, of whether your loss was expected, you saw it coming, like the death of a loved one after a terminal diagnosis, or unexpected, you didn't see it coming, like a natural disaster, you may be in some sort of grief haze of your own right now, a sort of shock that shrunk your life down into the bare bones minimum of just survive. And shock is in many ways very, very protective. It's our brain and our body trying to do the job of keeping like the pokiest and sharpest edges of grief slightly blurred or slightly farther away until we're able to emotionally, mentally, and maybe even physically tolerate them. But somewhere for a lot of grievers in year 2, that shock begins to wear off. The buffer to the world dissolves. And when it does, the reality of your loss becomes undeniable. You may find yourself feeling emotions more deeply or being caught off guard by delayed waves of sorrow or rage, my favorite emotion, or even numbness. The people around you may assume that you're better now, that the 1-year mark has passed. Heavy air quotes again there. But in truth, you are just beginning to fully feel what you have been simply surviving up until now. Here's another reason that the second year is often harder than the firsts. You've lived through every grief-related first. Now comes forever. The first year after a loss is full of firsts, without first birthday, first anniversary, first holiday season, first time hearing that one heartbreaking song in public and you have to figure out what to do about it, first time needing to call someone and remembering you can't, first time doing something you've never had to do before. The list of firsts goes on and on and on and on. When you're in your first year of loss, it can seem like the firsts never stop coming. And do not get me wrong, those firsts and living through them is brutal. But they also carry a sort of strange momentum. You brace for them. You see them coming on the calendar. You start to rack up I survived points for everyone that you live through. And people often acknowledge them by sending a text or a card or a bouquet of flowers or an outreach on social media. And then year 2 comes, and the calendar doesn't feel as urgent anymore. But the pain of the grief and the milestones still stick around. And that's what starts to settle in, this deeper, quieter grief of, oh my God, I have to do this forever. You realize that this is not just an ache that sticks around for a year. This isn't something you'll get through once and never have to deal with again. This is your life now, with grief in it, always forever. Suddenly, you are no longer bracing for short-term impact. You are staring down the looming threat of every upcoming grief date between now and the day you die. That is a huge perspective shift that comes in year 2, and not enough people are talking about it. Here's a fourth reason that the second year is harder than the first. More loss comes to the forefront, not less. And here's what I mean by that. Another struggle that often appears in year 2 is the arrival, so often suddenly, of secondary losses, or more loss on top of loss. And if you're not familiar with the concept of secondary losses, I'll do like a little crash course. Your primary loss is like the big overarching loss that you can name. For example, my dad died. My fiance broke things off. I lost my job. My sister got diagnosed with cancer. My cat died, and so on. Anything that you can name of like, I have lost something, something died. There's some part of my life that can no longer be. That's the primary loss. I usually see it as like a big umbrella that all the other losses live under. Your secondary losses are the underground, just as heavy losses that happen underneath that umbrella. They are happening as a result of, or as a byproduct of, or a consequence of, or a cascading order of events of the primary loss. You might not recognize them in year 1 because you are so focused on grieving the primary loss, but they tend to make an appearance once year 2 begins. Here's some examples for you. Secondary losses. A friendship that you now have to grieve because it could not hold space for your grief. An identity. I see this so often in Life After Loss Academy, such as artist, husband, teacher, productive worker, that no longer fits who you see and know yourself to be now. A dream that now feels impossible to achieve, or that loss has rendered no longer true for you. Things like, especially in our society, access to money, resources, power, or community. These things often metaphorically die or literally die when we experience a devastating loss. A future life that you can no longer live, hopes, dreams, expectations for the future. A sense of stability, family, or home. In one of the first blogs I ever wrote about grief, I talked about a feeling of homelessness that came along with grief after my mom died. Even though I had a place to live, I felt homeless in the world. And then a version of you, grieving yourself or the parts of yourself that died along with your primary loss. And sometimes in year 2, in addition to this list of secondary losses, you may also uncover unexpected truths, things like family secrets or relational betrayals or financial issues or medical realities that you hadn't known the full extent of when the loss first happened. And of course, sometimes, also devastatingly, more primary losses can literally happen. Perhaps your dad dies and then you get laid off, or somebody else in your life gets diagnosed with something, or your health changes, or a global or political crisis forces you back into another cycle of some sort of primary grief that comes with its own suitcase of secondary losses. Inside my course in Community Life After Loss Academy, my students describe year 2 not as, I've never heard them say this, a season of relief, but a season of navigating even more loss than they thought they would ever contend with because of all these secondary losses, because of sort of the creaking open of Pandora's box that comes on day 366 when you cross into another year, a second year. Maybe the same sense that, oh my God, there is more to grieve underneath all of this grief is true for you as well. Here's yet another reason that the second year is harder than the first. You are on what I call the swinging rope bridge of identity loss. And this is something that nobody really talks about, or like a lot of grief professionals make space for, but like the larger world doesn't make space for. It is that in the second year of grief, you are still figuring out who the hell you are. In one of my most popular video lessons inside the release module, the second module of Life After Loss Academy, I refer to this phenomenon as the swinging rope bridge season of your life. And you can visualize it like this. You have your life before loss on one side. You have your life after loss, or your new normal, as some people call it. That's not my favorite phrase, but your new normal on the other side. And connecting those things is a swinging rope bridge. You have been forced to leave behind the solid ground of who you used to be, who you knew yourself to be, before the death, before the divorce, the diagnosis, the identity shift, but you have not yet arrived at solid ground, or sort of an identity settling, on the other side. You are metaphorically suspended in uncertainty. You are moving through the mist of the in-between, sometimes forward, sometimes backwards, sometimes side to side, sometimes who knows. You are trying to build a meaningful future while still sorting through the pain of the past, and you are carrying all of it with you all of the time. This season of your life, this rope bridge season, is enormously disorienting and super duper tender. It is so hard to make decisions or to set goals because you don't necessarily know where you're going or where life and grief will cause you to end up. It is also hard to know exactly who you are and what you want because loss has the incredible power to sort of rearrange what we value and who we get support from and how we ask for help. This specific flavor of lostness, the swinging rope bridge season, is a hallmark of year 2 and beyond of grief. And I'm going to reiterate what I said at the beginning of this episode. You are not lost or stuck because something is wrong with you or because you're failing at grief. You are not bad at figuring out how to move forward. What this season of your life is, what year 2 often becomes, is the slow and sticky and confusing and painstaking nitty-gritty work of putting your life back together in a way that you can live with. Not in the way that it was before, because you cannot go back to what that solid ground used to be. Loss has rendered that life inaccessible to you. But in a way that feels honoring of everything and everyone you lost and are carrying, and who you are becoming. Suffice it to say that I strongly believe that the first year of grief is the worst is a lie and a myth. Eurocentric Western culture has done a stunning job of creating timelines and tidy boxes for a normal human experience. Loss that is not normal or tidy at all. Our society has created this deeply embedded belief that you get a year to grieve, you find closure, and then you go back to who you were before. That's really simple, isn't it? I love a 3-step process. But grief does not give 2 shits about what our culture thinks of it, much less any sort of arbitrary timeline. What's more true about grief is grief has no finish line. It just keeps going. Year 2 is not the end of your loss. It is often the beginning of deeper healing. And you do not go back. You move and you grow forward by force with grief in tow. I often in Life After Loss Academy talk about building a life you love from the one that loss forced you to live. There is no way to go back to what you knew before, the beginning or where you started before you got pushed onto that rope bridge. The only way to figure out who you are now, what you want, what your goals are, what has meaning anymore, how to carry your grief forward is by walking forward. And you are doing that right now. And if you have suspected that people around you aren't telling the whole truth when they say things like the first year is the worst or it'll be better after the first year, you are absolutely right. Your intuition, your feelers are ringing correctly. But beyond being right, it is important to know that despite, or maybe inclusive of your losses, you are also incredibly smart. You know the real story, that year 2 marks the continuation of the grief that began the day your loss happened, or sometimes for the case of anticipatory losses where you knew a loss was coming, even before that. Just because there are no more firsts does not mean that there is no more grief to contend with. Grief will always work its way into the tiniest crevices and also the largest milestones of your life. It will be present forever, non-negotiably. Again, not because you are incapable of moving on, but because that is simply the nature of grief. Before we go today, I need you to know that if you are struggling in year 2 or beyond of grief, here's what I want you to take with you. You are not behind. Grief is not a race, and there is no magical timeline for when you should be done grieving. You are where you are, and that is more than okay, especially all things considered in this, the year of our Lord 2026. There is nothing wrong with you. And if year 2 feels heavier than you expected or than others told you it would be, it is not because you're doing something wrong. It is because now you are doing the real and raw work of learning how to live with your grief. You still deserve support. Just because the cards or texts have stopped coming does not mean your need for care has ended. I hope you will seek out spaces where you do not have to hide your grief. Life After Loss Academy is one place you can do that, but there are literally thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of others. And you are allowed to grieve forever. Grief doesn't ever really go away. It just transforms. You can find personal and even compassionate ways to carry it with you as you build a beautiful and meaningful and joy-filled life. I think a lot of people hear the word grief and they think bad, sad, suffering, agony, despair. But there is another part of grief too that is related to remembering, that is related to resilience, that is related to growth, that is related to having ancestral ties or figuring out your own values and things that you want in the world. Grief does not mean bad all the time. I think that's another thing our Eurocentric westernized society does really well, is creates like anti-grief propaganda, basically. But real grievers know, and you know, as you're listening to this show called Grief Grower, that grief doesn't disappear just because time has passed. It changes shape. Grief doesn't get easier, necessarily. It just gets different. And sometimes that difference, especially in year 2, feels heavier before it feels lighter. If you are in the second year of life after loss, wondering why everything feels like a struggle, know this: you are not failing. You are not slow. You are not weak or deficient or broken. You are not incapable of coping. You are in the in-between. You are recognizing grief's permanence as a fixture in your life. You are noticing additional losses that need your tending, both new and old. You are on the metaphorical rope bridge of identity loss and who am I now and what do I need and how is my support system changed and how have I changed and where am I going from here? And even though this rope bridge is swinging over a vast pit of God knows what, you are still doing the work of crossing it. There is life ahead. There is meaning to build. And there are grieving people like you who get it and who are already walking with you. Inside Life After Loss Academy and in a few of my books, I talk about how everyone is alone on their grief planet. But when we look around and see from our grief planet that there are other grief planets and other constellations of grievers in the world, it can make us feel a little bit less alone. We can be reminded that there are others on their own swinging rope bridges, on their own grief planets, with their own losses and their own stories and their own things that they're carrying. And it sort of reinforces that it's okay to have ours. Because it is. It is a normal, natural thing to continue to have grief long after the first year. If you are struggling in year 2 of grief or beyond, or before, if you are negotiating a loss right now, I hope that you will consider joining us inside my online course and community, Life After Loss Academy. This is a virtual place that offers short and on-demand video lessons from me, weekly live grief coaching with me, also with replays available if you can't come live, and a resource library that is chock full of my favorite podcasts and books and articles and just like tools to companion you as you figure out year 2 of grief and beyond, or before, wherever you are in your grief. It is designed for all types of losses, death, divorce, diagnosis, and more. And it is for all timelines, no matter how long it's been. We have students join who are 3 months out from a loss. We have students join 20 years after the fact and say, I've never really grieved this part of my loss or this element of my grief, or something in the world or a fresh loss has brought up something old and they want to process that in community. That is the work we do inside of Life After Loss Academy. This is my signature roadmap of tools and support that has guided grievers through devastating loss since 2020. So if you would like to join us inside Life After Loss Academy, the doors are always open because grief happens 365 days a year. And you can find a link to do that in the show notes. I am sending you so much love and so much grace and so much, like, if you can feel like reinforcements as you navigate whatever year you are in after loss. But this episode, especially this one, goes out to all the folks who are living in year 2 and wondering, why the heck is this so hard? I hope this provided you some validation and some reassurance and some answers. I'll see you next time. That's all for this episode of Grief Grower. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're looking for grief support beyond this show, you can find free workshops, blog articles, and my new What's Your Grief Supporter Strength quiz at shelbyforsythia.com/links. And if you'd like to get support from me for your unique loss experience, you can join us in Life After Loss Academy. As a student, I will walk you through my 5-step grief framework, GRIEF, for rebuilding life after loss, and you can get live coaching from me every single week to answer your questions and help you through your struggles. Replays are always available if you can't attend live. It is just $33 a month to join, or $22 a month if you're a marginalized or financially stressed griever, and you can cancel at any time. If this podcast felt validating, comforting, educational, or otherwise helpful to you, please subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And be sure to share this episode with a friend, because you never know what someone you love is going through. Grief Grow is hosted by me, Shelby Forsythia, and the theme music is composed by our own Addie Goldstein. Until next time, I see you. I am so proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world. And I love you. Because even through grief, we are growing.